Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Look at all this hair. Good morning, honey. If you want to get in a picture with us, come over here. My babies. I love you so much. Who's this?
Baby sister.
Baby
Mama.
sister.
Anna.
That's right. Look how cute.
That was mine when I was a little baby.
Yeah, that was yours when you were a little baby.
Look at him. He's funny.
I cannot tell you how long it's been since I filmed a video, like 6 months maybe, and I have made every excuse in my head as to why I can't film. So I'm gonna finally make this video. I'm going to share about the birth of my second child, our second child. I'm going to share her name, which has been asked a million bazillion times. And yeah, this will just be like my first little update back into the world of YouTube. I'm gonna get dressed, I just took a shower. And then I think I'll just film in my bedroom. All right, it's kind of dark outside. Hopefully there's enough natural lighting in here. I can tell that this little piece of hair is gonna drive me crazy. This is like my hair growing out from when I had Honor. You know, after you have a baby, usually a lot of your hair falls out a few months after birth and then it grows back. And so I have like a haircut that's like around here and it doesn't quite fit into my braid yet. Anyways, okay, we're gonna talk about the birth of baby number 2. I always enjoy hearing birth stories, and a lot of people ask me questions about whether I was planning to try for a natural birth, whether I was going to have a second C-section, because I did have a C-section with Honor. Where do I even start here? I can't even believe I've had 2 kids. It feels so surreal. Sitting down and really thinking about it, yeah, wow. Okay, there's a lot of things I didn't share about my pregnancy with baby number 2. I feel with your first child, you can really kind of sit down, take the pregnancy in, rest, and document whatever you want to document. When you're taking care of a toddler and simultaneously going through a subsequent pregnancy, you just have less time for everything. So I don't feel like I documented the pregnancy as much. It was my 5th pregnancy total. I had an early loss before Honor, a miscarriage at 8 weeks, and then my full-term pregnancy. And then after that, I had a really weird pregnancy in like December, January, right before I got pregnant with baby number 2. That was like a pregnancy of an unknown location / a suspected ectopic pregnancy. I have talked about that in other videos, so I'm not going to dive too much into that, but that was like a really strange experience. It was absolutely an unviable pregnancy. I feel like I need to reiterate that because people just don't understand that pregnancy would have never resulted in a live birth. I had taken a drug called methotrexate per my doctor's guidance to speed up the end of the like suspected ectopic pregnancy, and there was a recommended washout period of, I honestly can't remember off the top of my head, I think it's 3 to 6 months after taking a single dose of methotrexate. So you're really not supposed to get pregnant in that period. And really what it comes down to is that no studies have ever been done around that, because it's, you know, unethical to do studies with tetragenic drugs on pregnant women or women who are trying to conceive or whatnot. What word did I just say? Teratogenic is what I meant to say. Tetragenic is maybe what I said. Teratogenic. Drugs that can cause harm to an unborn baby. Okay, so there was supposed to be a washout period. However, if you read about the drug or what the manufacturer says about the drug and you get pregnant in that washout period, it's not, the manufacturer of the drug doesn't recommend terminating the pregnancy, and it is likely that you will still have a healthy pregnancy. So I wanted to quickly address that because I've gotten some questions on that as well, but it was not like a plan to go that route. However, once I was pregnant, I did some like extra testing and whatnot with the genetic counselor, and I had some extra appointments with my doctor to confirm that the pregnancy was indeed healthy and that the baby was not at risk or anything for any abnormalities. You know, we just wanted to be sure there wasn't something we should know about. I ended up going back to the same doctor who delivered Honor, who is far away from where I live, but I felt the most comfortable with him. When I had met with some other doctors who were closer to our new house, I mean, there were some doctors that I felt were giving really bad advice. There was one doctor in particular who recommended terminating the pregnancy, and I haven't really talked about this. I have so many feelings around it. Like how horrible it would have been to take that advice when I delivered a healthy baby. And this is not a criticism on the medical community as a whole. You know, you gotta partially go with your gut instincts and also find a team, whether it's one doctor or a team of doctors who like are on the same page as you. And yeah, healthy, very healthy baby born in October. I had been debating over the course of my last pregnancy whether I wanted to do another C-section, like a planned C-section, or whether I wanted to try for a vaginal birth after cesarean, otherwise known as a VBAC. A lot of women successfully have VBACs, but it's kind of like a personal choice, and there are pros and cons with both. There's risk factors with both, so you have to weigh out what makes sense for you as an individual, and then, you know, talk with your doctor about it. So I was comfortable with the idea of having another cesarean if I needed to have one, but my doctor gave me the option. He said I could do either. He said he thought it was safe to try for a VBAC if that's what I wanted to do, and I kind of yo-yoed between both throughout the course of the pregnancy. Like one day I would think, okay, I'm definitely gonna try for a VBAC. I feel like that's the best decision for my body. And then a couple days later, after harping on it so much in my mind, I would think like, no, I'm definitely gonna do a scheduled C-section. I know what to expect going in, and you know, it's more controlled and all that stuff. And I just really could not decide. My doctor was really cool about it, and we agreed that the best option would be to schedule a C-section around my due date, but then I didn't have to have it if I didn't want to. So if I decided I wanted to have a vaginal birth or try for a vaginal birth, then we would just cancel that scheduled C-section. So that's kind of how I went through pregnancy. And then shortly after 37 weeks, which was the same time I had Honor, I went to bed and I was having some contractions. They weren't very strong, but they were coming at somewhat regular intervals. And when I woke up, I think they were coming every 4 minutes when I was timing. Because I've never experienced a natural labor before, I mean, I didn't know if I was in labor or in early labor, or like, you know, I just didn't know. So I called my doctor and he recommended that I come into the hospital so they could evaluate what was happening. It was also the same day that we were getting our dishwasher replaced. After having a dishwasher for years now, it's such a luxury that I guess we take for granted, because when we didn't have one, I mean, doing the dishes was just a lot more work. So I was determined to have our dishwasher installed before we went to the hospital. The dishwasher technician came over in the morning, and I told my doctor, okay, I'm gonna come in after our dishwasher is installed. And he said, that's not what I recommend, but I know you're gonna do what you're gonna do, so I'll see you in a bit. Dishwasher got installed, and Nick and I headed to the hospital. I don't fully remember like leaving to go to the hospital. I feel like my brain has somehow blocked out that part. Not that it was traumatic. I do remember, however, that I did not eat breakfast, which was a huge mistake. If you end up needing some type of like medical intervention during a hospital birth, they often will recommend that you don't eat food because it reduces the risk of aspirating food under anesthesia. They want your stomach to be empty so that you don't vomit and aspirate food into your lungs. And yeah, so I didn't eat breakfast thinking that, you know, they would not want me to eat breakfast. What ended up happening is we got to the hospital, they checked to see how dilated I was, and I was only like 1 centimeter dilated, which is not a lot. But, you know, I was hooked up to, I don't know what the machine is called. It basically picks up your contractions, and I was having regular contractions several minutes apart. So they thought that I was in a very early stage of labor. In order to check how dilated you are, a nurse or a doctor has to give you a cervical exam. That happened pretty much as soon as I got to the hospital and got checked in and everything. I want to note that all the nurses were great who helped me out, but the nurse that was taking care of me when I got to the hospital, amazing bedside manner, but she was not the most gentle. She was the person who gave me the first cervical exam to see how dilated I was, and it was so painful. Honestly, I've never really felt anything like that. Something inside of me was just like, if I can't handle this cervical exam, I cannot handle a natural birth. I'm gonna get so much hate for this. I already know that's gonna happen, but basically once I got the cervical exam, I was like, you know what? I think I wanna have a C-section. It was kind of like a snap decision in my brain, and I thought, nope, I don't wanna do this. I would just rather have a C-section. I know what to expect. I know how it's going to turn out. I know there's pros and cons and risk factors. Let me do a second C-section. But we still had to wait for my doctor and everything. And he was gonna come like several hours later. The doctor that delivered both of my kids, the doctor that I'm talking about, he's a perinatologist, a high-risk doctor. So he, you know, throughout the day has other cases that perhaps are more time sensitive than what I was going through, because I wasn't in active labor. I was kind of in, I guess, pre-labor. I ended up staying at the hospital for many, many, many hours. The first time he came into the hospital room, I think I had already been there for 6 hours, and I hadn't eaten in that 6-hour window. They might have let me have a tiny bit of water, but at that point I was just absolutely starving. When I'm not pregnant, I don't do well not eating. Fasting never has been for me. Skipping a meal, if I do it on accident, I feel horrible. So like I pretty much try to always make sure that I have food in my stomach, and waiting that long, especially in pregnancy, I started to feel really sick. My body was really hungry, and it made me feel horrible. So knowing that I was going to have a C-section, the staff at the hospital would not let me eat any food. And I was so hungry, the anesthesiologist finally approved that I could have some clear liquids, which included broth and jello. Even though it's not technically a liquid, it falls into the category of things you're allowed to eat. I like drank as much broth as I possibly could. I think I had like 4 jellos or something. I was just so hungry, and my body, I was feeling like really shaky and jittery. Just that horrible feeling when you don't have food in your stomach. So as the day continued to progress, I basically felt worse and worse not being able to have food. And my doctor simultaneously had a couple of more urgent cases. So he was supposed to come back to the hospital, I think at like 6 p.m. I had been there since the morning, and he didn't end up coming back until almost 10 p.m. And when he came back, he gave me the option to wait. He said, you know, you can wait until tomorrow morning if you want to have that scheduled C-section tomorrow. You can do it tonight if you want, but you can also go home if you want. I do think there's something to be said about the fact that my doctor leaves a lot of decisions up to the patient, like when he is able to. And I feel like I had a lot of power to kind of choose what I wanted to do. If I could go back in time, I wish that I had waited and just done the C-section the morning after, because then I could have just eaten a very full dinner. I could have gotten a hopefully good night of sleep at the hospital, and then I could have just done a C-section early in the morning, which is pretty much what I did with Honor. However, because I had been at the hospital all day and I had not had food and I felt ill, I was just, I think at this point, ready to do it. So I asked my doctor if it was safe, you know, if it was still safe to do a C-section that night. He said it was, and we just basically went right into the surgery. I got prepped for the surgery, and then I was in the OR, the operating room, shortly thereafter with the anesthesiologist getting a spinal. And that's for sure my least favorite part of both C-sections, I would say. Both times I've had a spinal, I feel like it kind of numbed me up to my chest. Like my chest wall was numb, and that's like a really uncomfortable feeling. So I had this C-section around like 11 something at nighttime, and I mean, as with my other C-section, it was very fast. It's like you go into the operating room and something like 10 minutes later you have a baby. It's really surreal. It's really wild. I was worried with my first birth that it would feel kind of like I was cheating or not experiencing, you know, the proper way to have a baby, but I didn't feel like that either time. Our baby came out totally healthy, perfect weight. She was, you know, on the smaller side because she was early. I think she was almost exactly the same weight as Honor, actually. And this is a funny point because when I was pregnant with Honor, they thought that she might have growth restriction. And then when I had her, she didn't really have growth restriction. It sometimes is hard to tell on ultrasounds how big a baby is going to be. And then with this second baby, ultrasounds showed that she was larger than average. And then she came out weighing almost the exact same amount that Honor weighed when she was born. I think baby 2 was 6 pounds and 2 ounces. And Honor was 6 pounds and 1 ounce. So pretty much almost the same. After I had Honor, I did feel really nauseous for about an hour after giving birth. I mean, it's not a good feeling. I didn't throw up, but I felt like icky. I think it's partially from the anesthesia and the drugs that you get during a C-section, and partially just from the adrenaline your body naturally produces when you're, you know, birthing another human into the world. And this second C-section, I felt that amplified. I actually felt horrible after the C-section, and I really want to say this is because I went into the C-section feeling very bad from not eating for many hours, and then when I came out, I still felt very bad from not eating, and I also felt that like adrenaline sickness feeling. I don't know how else to describe it, but I was extremely shaky after this birth. Like I really couldn't, I felt like I couldn't even hold the baby. I just felt so uncomfortable. Like I couldn't get my hands to stop shaking or my body. I wasn't anxious. I just felt like ill and super shaky. The nurses kept saying, if you breathe and you think about relaxing, sometimes your body will relax. And I really tried that so many times. But yeah, I was just coming down from that birth adrenaline and coming down from the anesthesia, and I felt gross. I felt like I was on a boat, motion sickness feeling, and I really just felt like if somebody could get me some food, I think I would feel a lot better. And I stand by the fact that if I had food, I think I would have improved. Even if someone just gave me like saltines or something. The nurses would not give me food, and they did not give me food for many hours after this. And that was like not cool. My doctor told me I could eat whenever I felt up for it. And they started me off with like some ice chips. And then I think maybe 3 hours after I had the baby, you know, the nurses were like, just try to go to sleep. But I was so hungry, there was no way that was gonna happen. At this point, I think Nick had already gone home to help take care of Honor. And second birth, you know, way different. First birth, I stayed at the hospital for 3 nights and Nick was there the whole time. Second baby was like, okay, operating room, C-section, woo, we had a baby. Bonding time after that, we spent a couple hours together with the baby, and then Nick left and I was just there by myself. I would not have felt comfortable with that at all after I had Honor. You know, first time parent, you just feel like you don't know what you're doing. Second time parent, it's like, okay, go home now, make sure our other kid's okay, see you when I see you, and we will be all good at the hospital. And we were fine. I still felt like shit, honestly, until I ate some food. There was like a point, I don't even know why the nurses wouldn't give me food because my doctor had approved it. So I kept pushing the call button asking. And then I was like, you know what? I have a bag of snacks in the room that I packed myself. I finally had a nurse come in and I said, listen, if you guys can't get me food, then I'm just gonna eat my snacks now. And finally they brought me up like a breakfast plate. I think it was like at 7:30 in the morning. At that point I had not had food in like 36 hours or something. It was just way too long to go. And once I ate this massive plate of breakfast food, I felt honestly great. And I wish that I had done that right after I had the cesarean. So if I could redo that second birth, what I would do is have the C-section the next morning, like I said, after a full night of eating and a full night of sleep. And then after the C-section, I wish I ate a lot sooner. And that was really like what it came down to. If I ever do this again, I now have 2 C-sections under my belt. I know what to expect and I know what to do. So that's my birth story. It's now 5 months later, 5.5 months or something later. And my C-section is healing wonderfully. My first scar healed really, really well from the beginning. And the second one, I actually did think it was infected a few days after I had the baby. But I think it was just red and kind of irritated. It might have also been from you have like steri strips on and stuff. And yeah, it's ended up healing really, really well. My scar's already pretty much completely flat. This time I used silicone strips over the scar, and I think it made a big difference. Even though my other incision healed really well too. I don't know if I'm missing any information here. I think that's essentially it. I've now had 2 C-sections. I do not know what it's like to experience a vaginal birth. I do not feel regret. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them below. Okay, I think that's it. Everyone wants to know the baby's name. I'm going to tell you the baby's name. I do think that if you don't want to share your kid's name, you don't have to. There's been a lot of pressure to share the baby's name, and I really wasn't trying to hide the name from the internet. I kind of had a hard time associating this baby with her name, even though it was really kind of my other name option when I was pregnant with Honor. Maybe I will let Honor tell you. Hi! I am filming a video. What are you doing? Wait, when Daddy was little, he was a seahorse?
No, he rode on the seahorse and he said, please.
He rode on the seahorse and he said, please?
Like the seahorses at the park on the Springs.
Oh.
And she said, can I please ride on a seahorse? And she said, did you ask like that when you were a little boy?
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
She's playing.
Honor, what is baby sister's name?
Baby. She's playing.
What is her name?
Baby.
What's your sister's name?
Baby. And she's playing.
She's playing, yeah.
Baby Pierce.
Baby.
Baby Pierce.
I'm just sliding down this slide.
Okay.
Woo!
So, there you go. Baby sister's name is Baby Pierce. I called her baby sister almost exclusively for the first like 3 months after I had her. I don't know why it was hard for me to say her name, especially because it's a name that I love and it's my friend's name. I wanted to talk about the backstory behind her name quickly. When I was pregnant with Honor, I actually asked my friend, whose name is Pierce, if she would be comfortable with me using her name. I told her that we hadn't definitively decided what we were going to name the baby, but yeah, I have this friend named Pierce. I've known her for a really long time. I don't even know when we met, and she's amazing. Her personality is just very unique. She's so funny. She's just such a great person. And I remembered how much I loved her name when I first was introduced to her. So I've always had that name kind of in the back of my head when thinking about having kids. She spells it differently than the baby's name, and we decided to go with the spelling P-I-E-R-C-E. Yeah, P-I-E-R-C-E. That's how our baby's name is spelled. Nick and I had talked about the name even early on in pregnancy, and then we kind of were feeling out other names to see if they felt right. Towards the end of the pregnancy, I started seeing the word Pierce everywhere. It was crazy. I would see like signs, and I started just seeing the word in so many different places, and I felt like, okay, this is some sort of sign from the universe, or multiple signs from the universe, that this is our baby's name. I love her name so much. It also reminds me of my friend who is amazing and who I love and who I'm still in touch with. So yeah, our baby's name is Pierce. Thank you guys for watching this very long video. I'm going to have to find the time to edit it. Hopefully I can do that later tonight. If you have any questions about anything, I don't even know how to film videos anymore. If you have any questions about my birth experience, feel free to leave them below. I'm sure I left details out, and I'm gonna think of them when I'm editing. Okay, I have a couple quick things to add to this video. As I was editing, I knew I would leave information out. The first thing I wanted to say was that my second C-section was harder than my first. The hardest part was actually the recovery, and I think part of it had to do with just having a toddler already. Because I had the C-section, I couldn't pick her up for, I can't remember if it was 6 or 8 weeks, but it was over a month when I couldn't pick on or up, and she's used to being, you know, picked up often, so that was a big adjustment for me. Also, when you have a C-section, they do cut through many layers of skin, and they also cut through nerves. That's why a lot of women have numbness around their incision site, which does tend to resolve, or at least partially resolve, over time. I had a lot more nerve damage during my second C-section. I guess it's just kind of a risk with each C-section that you have. And so I had a lot of nerve pain in the weeks following birth. A lot more pain than I remember having after my first cesarean. It really hurt to have like clothes touching my entire abdominal area as those nerves were regenerating and healing. That largely resolved after about a month. Going along with that, I do think I have some permanent nerve damage. I got a spinal block with both of my C-sections. Like I said, it numbs you like very high up. It's a bit different than an epidural, but they're both types of anesthesia. This time around, when the anesthesia wore off, even when my legs weren't numb anymore and stuff, my big toe on my right foot was numb. My big toe was numb, and I also had a very large section on my left butt cheek, which was totally numb. The butt part, it has gone back to normal, but my big toe is still completely numb. And it's not comfortable. I mean, I'm used to it now because it's been months, but it's, you know, I walk on my feet every single day. I don't know, anyone else who's experienced this, please let me know in the comment section. I don't think it's totally a typical thing that happens, but my doctor said it can happen sometimes. Yeah, so my big toe is numb and that hasn't gone away. It's a little bit disappointing, but you know, in the scope of things, it's not the worst thing that could have happened. The third thing I want to say is the after contractions. I didn't talk about this, but after you have a baby, whether or not you have a vaginal birth or a cesarean, you have what's called after contractions, and that's when your uterus starts shrinking back to its normal size. And it starts pretty soon after birth. Especially if you're breastfeeding, you will often notice some of those first contractions when you're breastfeeding. I remember having them after Honor, but they weren't super painful. And this time around, they were very, very, very painful, to the point where I didn't even know that's what they were at first. I was like complaining of these really sharp pains that were coming when I was breastfeeding, and then it kind of clicked for me, and one of the nurses confirmed it. So those were very painful after my second birth. I don't really think there's any pain medications or anything you can take for them. You just have to sort of ride it out. Thankfully, it was only 3 days where I really felt those intense after contractions, and then after that, I really didn't notice any more of them, or at least none of them that were that painful. But that is something to note, because I've been told that they get worse and worse or more painful with each baby you have. Both of my birth experiences were overall pretty positive as a whole. My first birth was great. I have an entire video on it if you want to know more about it. My second birth was fine. It wasn't traumatic. It wasn't super, super negative. There were a couple challenges during and after that I've described in this video, but otherwise it was fine. I have had, unfortunately, thyroid issues as a consequence of pregnancy and birth. That is very common, and it doesn't necessarily indicate that you will have thyroid issues for the rest of your life. Mine is really kind of more complicated than a normal case of autoimmune thyroid issues, so I won't even try to explain that in this video, but I am under the care of an endocrinologist who is great. And this time I feel like it's much more in control because I'm getting my blood checked regularly, and I will take medication for it if I have to. Yeah, okay, so I wanted to add those things in. Now back to the rest of my video. If I had to do it again, I would do it again. Am I going to do it again? That's a question for the future.